Welcome to another episode of the CyberAware Podcast series with me, your host Sherwin, and co-host Raj. We're joined today by our guest speaker, Mubasser Kamal. In this episode, we focus on cyberpunk. Let's begin.
For our listeners out there, Mubasser, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. This is Mubassir. I finished my master's from MSU 2 years ago in IT, and now I've been currently working with a pen testing company in Minneapolis called NetSpy. So I'm working there as a security consultant. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And I just wanted to expound a bit more on our title that we selected, Cyberpunks. I was kind of going on the gaming bandwagon. I know that there's a great video game coming out called Cyberpunk 2077 that I don't know if you're a gamer at all, Mobu.
Yeah.
But I'm super pumped for that. But essentially, I just wanted to play on that title a bit and just trying to focus on more of cyber theft and malicious criminal activity in regards to hacking. All right, let's start with our first question. What are the most common cyber criminal activities?
So one of them would be, or the most vulnerable, I think, is actually got to be the phishing stuff, right? Because the phishing stuff, it gets a huge amount of victims, right? I mean, and recently it started off with, if you see the COVID-19, there has been like a upsurge of different kind of phishing, and there's been an increase of SMS phishing going on a lot. So that I would say. And then if I have to get into specifics, there's always the database injection that happens. A lot of the software hacking that's been happening with web applications, they're usually starts off with SQL injection, or in case of no SQL injection, it's some kind of like filter bypassing.
Yeah, I know phishing is a big issue that we tackle on a daily basis, organization wide.
Yeah, and it has been a really big increase after this COVID-19.
Yeah, I just checked our inbox this morning and I've already got three phishing emails that I had to take a look into. Yeah, it's definitely something that's not gonna stop.
Yeah, it's a catch-22, I guess.
And the next question we have is, so from your standpoint, what are some of the most common exploits used by cyberpunks?
Um, hmm. So my point is usually I work with a lot of web applications, sometimes a little bit of thick clients. So web applications, like I said, is SQL injection, just some of the very basic stuff, a lot of cross-site request forgery, you see, um, and then running unpatched web servers is a big one. So unpatched OSs, unpatched web servers you're running. Because anybody can just like figure out the version you're running, and just go to like an CV website, and from there on you can kind of like tiptoe to figure out how to exploit that.
And for our listeners out there, could you just explain what cross-site forgery means and SQL injection for those that are unfamiliar with the terms?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'll start off with SQL injection because that's one of my favorites, and I think it's it's a big one. So let's say when you're searching, you go to a website and you're searching something, you're typing something on the text box, right? And it gives you the result back. So when you're searching, it takes whatever you're typing and it queries the database. So query just like, is asking the database, hey, by the way, this user typed in this thing. Could you check if you have this information, right? And the database gives you back the result. But if a malicious user, let's say an attacker, they can exploit that by typing the query, whatever they're searching, and then actually modifying the query in such a way to insert a database query, right? So let's say I'm going to give like a very quick example. It would be like, grab this data from this table, right? That's like a simple database query, but the hacker could be like, from this table, code, and where something, let's say 1 equals to 1, which is going to be rendered true, right? And the database goes like, oh, okay. So either I can if I don't have this information, but he gave me something that renders true, I can give him all the data. So it's kind of like you're kind of like exfiltrating data in a way by tricking the database. And for cross-site request forgery, it's basically like a lot of times you see in different form submission. So when you have HTML, applications, you have like a form that you submit. You click a button, submit, and any attacker could send craft a link URL and send it to to the victim, and when they click on it and everything, since the form doesn't have a CSRF or a cross-site request forgery CSRF protection, then that victim is actually becoming a part of that attack, right? I mean, that's an innocent victim. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's clicked on it and he doesn't see anything what happened, but you just made him into like a part of that attack. So yeah.
Yeah, so just to clarify a bit, like for the SQL injection, essentially just adding in special characters even would qualify, right, into like a text field for a data set.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I guess you kind of have to know, like I guess the SQL language a little bit to figure out how to exploit that, but most of the time, a lot of websites like are very open to that attack. It's kind of crazy.
and hopefully organizations can focus more on fixing vulnerabilities in it.
Yeah, it's I think it will only get fixed when we kind of incorporate those practices into our programming practice, right? So we have to keep in mind that, hey, when we're building something, let's also keep the security aspect of that in mind.
All right. So for our next question, since your organization focuses on pen testing, what are some of the ways you guys try to assess and simulate such attacks?
So without going too much further into like clients specifically, since I can't, but so the way it works is, we have different variations of clients, and so they have different requirements how to go on about testing their infrastructure. It could be just like something focusing on the servers, right? And or else it could be like something on specific web application that they have, or it could be on like mobile applications and stuff, right? So those are like 4 different stuff that we have. So let's say web applications, they explain to us how the web applications work a little bit, and then they define a scope, what we can do. Like we can't just like unleash everything on on their server and kind of like bring it down. Even if it's usually like a testing server or something, we can't usually bring it down. So they set a scope. We discuss the scope with them, what we can do and we cannot do.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there we have our NetSpy, we have our own set of checklists, right? So that we go through, we have that, and then if we know it has a database, obviously like a database injection, we check for RCE, remote code attacks.
What exactly constitutes remote code attacks for the listeners?
So RCE is remote code execution, and let's say from a personal experience, I exploited one remote code, and it was so they were running an unpatched version of Apache, right?
And Apache's the server, correct?
Yeah, it was I'm not going to discuss the exact application they were using, but yeah, an Apache server. And so, like I said, like we check the CVE and stuff just to kind of see, if there's something. And then I found it has an exploit, and you guys would know that because I actually use Metasploit.
Mm-hmm.
So I use Metasploit to kind of like first, let's see, kind of poke through it a little bit. Let's see how much further I can get. And when it kind of looks like, hey, I might get an RCE, right? So usually we communicate with the client, because just to make sure that because when you get an RCE, you do have the leverage of jumping onto their other servers, right? And you kind of have to ask for them, hey, is it okay for you guys to, if I can poke around other servers too? So we communicate with the client saying that, hey, there's a probable RCE there. Can I poke around. And most of the time they go like, oh yeah, sure, and they're usually pretty enthusiastic depending on the clients. And then and I loaded up MSF, Metasploit, and yeah, from there I tried different payloads and set up a NetCat server, on my one as like a reverse listening.
And sorry to cut you off, but NetCat is another tool, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so NetCat is pretty much NetCat is you can make a connection to a server, or you can have a server connect to you, right? So the reason we do is that sometimes servers have any kind of inbound connections, so any incoming connections they put restrictions, right? So, but a lot of times they have any outbound connection, they can be pretty open because they're like, oh, anytime my server is trying to connect to something, I trust that. So with NetCat, what I did was that I tricked the application server to actually connect to me, right? Because they had an inbound firewall set up. So it made a reverse connection to my client, NetCat. And yeah, from there, I actually got a PowerShell. Like I opened a PowerShell because they were running Windows. And I mean, yeah, unfortunately, I didn't had the root access because they disabled root. But even the user I did have had a lot of privilege to just poke around the different systems, servers, and everything.
Yeah, and that's interesting to hear from your experience that certain organizations are they allow you guys to poke around, and they're more enthusiastic when it comes to things like that. I would think otherwise, that no, they view you guys as trying to really probe through their code and through their software, and really try to hamper progress per se by focusing too much. But that's a good thing that organizations take security seriously, at least with the clients that you deal with.
Yeah, a lot of clients are actually. From time to time you do have clients that are a little bit more, let's say, picky, right? So, but yeah, most of the time they'd like to cooperate with you.
So, talking about the attacks and stuff, there's the bad side, which is cybercrimes. And according to you, would you say are cybercrimes mostly organized, or are they largely independent?
Yeah, so nowadays, we're obviously seeing more state-sponsored attacks, right? So, now it's not only just groups of hackers, it's actually, government entities, right, that are actually employing the attacks. So, definitely it's organized, no doubt. And yeah, it's kind of like there's I might say it in the wrong way, but there's kind of like a mercenary hackers nowadays,
Hackers for hire, essentially.
Yeah, hackers for hiring, pretty much, right? Yeah, so they are kind of organized or semi-organized because anybody can pretty much hire them. But yeah.
And do they pick on organizational targets, or do they just pick on? So since you say mercenaries or hacker mercenaries, do they specifically go after any target they're paid for, or is it mostly high-end corporate?
I don't know. I don't really exactly know the specifics, but some of the reports that is in, it's usually the state sponsored attacks, and where they do hire this group of hackers, pretty much, right? And they are not really they don't really belong to any specific country or something. So that's why they're hackers for hire, right? They're getting hired by different countries or different corporations for actually doing espionage, right? So, yeah, I think their targets are usually high end, a little bit. They don't really target just specific general users per se, like you and me or something.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
But sometimes they can use us as a part of the attack, unknowingly. That's the scary thing.
Especially if we're a family connection to someone that works in a corporate institution or organization.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, that's how you can actually get into somebody, let's say a secured corporation. I mean, the best way you can get through them is somebody close to them, right? Like let's say their parents, they have an old parent that might not be tech savvy too much. So you target them, right? Do some phishing stuff and they take the bait, right? And from there on, since um, family usually inherently has a trust built in between in with each other, so so you're already in the network of trust.
Right. It's just another form of privilege escalation, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can say that. That's a good way to put it.
Kind of according to like what your experience has been in the past few months due to the pandemic, have you seen kind of an increase in cybercrime? And if yes, like what specifically kind of have you seen?
Yeah, I've seen a lot. Like you even mentioned that how you got the spam and everything. I've seen a huge influx of just phishing, spam email. The new form that I've seen is through text messages. That's where I'm kind of like, oh, I do get text message, oh, something about COVID, and I'm like, okay, and this time is actually more crucial because you can't blame people because people are panicking, right? And they're taking advantage of that people panicking to kind of rush them into performing an action, right? Oh, just click here and kind of like prompt them thing, right? So they are they are more easy prey now just because of the whole panic situation going on.
Right. And it's unfortunate that hackers are using, the attitude of the situation, and they're trying to manipulate it to their advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So for our next question, any tips or advice that you can offer for people to better protect themselves and avoid malicious cyber activity on their systems and possibly on their home network?
Yeah. Yeah. So like just by doing some, simple safety guidelines, I guess, I think you can protect yourself from 80% of the attacks. One would be if you ever see an email or get a call or a text message, that, might throw you off a little bit. You're like, something's weird. Always call them, call the corporations. Not, if you get a call from somebody calling you saying, oh, hey, I'm from this bank, or something, um, you should be like, oh, can you give me a callback number and I'm going to call you back, right? And a lot of times you would see if it's a spam call or a scam call, you would see that they are more persistent about not giving the phone number because, they're trying to like reel you in kind of thing. So if you get an email, from a bank or from, a company or something, always yourself kind of like email back. Don't reply to them, but email to your company, to your bank. Go to your website, type in the website actually if you see a link that you see on the email instead of clicking on the link, because what you see is not what you get when it comes to hacking, right? So you might see a really innocent looking URL in the email and you click on it, but hey, you don't know, it was maybe an URL shortener or something, and you're now taken to this like almost lookalike website where you type in your creds and you get hacked. So if you see a URL in the email, open up your browser and type it in yourself, right? For most part.
I mean, I know it's a little bit more effort for our listeners and probably people out there, but that really saves you a lot of money in the long run.
Oh yeah, I mean money, time, everything, and yeah. So that would be one thing, and um, network wise, I guess I would say home network. Nowadays, most of the router settings and everything they they do encourage users to apply best practices like oh, hey, password should be like 12 characters or more or something, and they're generally good guidelines, and use a WPA password scheme, not a WEP. So if you ever go on your router setting and you see it's set to WEP web password scheme, change it to a WPA2. So because WEPT is so easy to attack. Like it's gonna take maybe, I don't know, 2 hours or something, depending on like new computers. So change it to WPA2. Yeah.
And I know another common tip that I can share for our listeners out there is a lot of people forget to update the firmware from their original router settings once they get it out of the box.
Yep.
And if you don't patch it on a regular basis, just like any other device, it is pretty vulnerable and can be prone to attack.
Yeah. That was an interesting thing. I believe, was it, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the government of Japan that actually started employing a firmware upgrade to all the home users. I don't know if you have heard about it. So it was kind of like, anybody is, vulnerable router can become a point of attack or a point of access, right, to corporations or companies, right? And so the Japanese government, they were like, hey, we're gonna start patching, your guys' routers. So
yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard about that specifically, but I did hear of something quite recently in the news. I knew there was I know of there's a new attack that was it was a botnet attack, and it was I fail to remember the hacker's name, but it was just one hacker controlling a bunch of different devices, and that's pretty much how a botnet attack works. And he was gaining access to all of these systems via old D-Link routers, and so people hadn't patched their D-Link routers, and they were getting pop-up notifications. And so right now it's less of a concern since all these D-Link routers are being, they're being discarded because they're reaching end of life anyway. But the funny thing is that this hacker was not using it for any malicious purpose, but he was just hacking into people's system and creating this army just so he can download anime videos.
Oh, I did hear about that. Right. Yeah.
You heard about that, right?
That was funny. Yeah. I think
I found that hilarious.
think he's, yeah.
I forgot his name. Yeah, it's the botnet. It peaked at around 10,000 bots in 2015, which is crazy because it's a pretty old hack or an article.
It kind of begs the question, like, what would you call him? Is he a white hat or a black hat?
I'd call him somewhere in between, so he might be a
Gray
hat. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's an ethical question right now. From my personal opinion, I would still call him a black hat, because think about that. I mean, because he's using your IP address, right? I mean, that's associated with you to obtain something illegally.
Right, and it's without your permission.
Right. Oh, and it's without your permission. So it's kind of like, well, if I were to download something offensive material and using your network, right? So I don't know.
Especially with the copyright restrictions and stuff that.
Yeah, because you could be facing charges, and while he's just watching away animes.
Oh, I don't know if you've seen, or I don't know if it's any relevant, but what did you think about Elon Musk and naming of his son?
That is, yes. So I did see I'm not sure. I think Elon Musk did show up in Joe Rogan's podcast recently, and he was like, it's pronounced X-A12. I mean, he's the first human to be named after a password.
Yeah.
Right.
His username and password could be the same.
There was a great meme where it was like, a lot of people name their passwords after their kid.
Yep.
And then Elon Musk is like, no, I named my kid after my password. And there's another one that it was even like, oh, password strength maximum, because it uses all characters, numbers.
That's true, actually. Yeah, even I think, how many letters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I think 8 almost. That's true, because that AE, that Ash, I think it's one character, right? I'm not sure, actually. What's the rule for name registration? Just like your birth certificate wise,
I definitely know that there are special characters because Spanish names have accents.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Even French names. I know in German, for German names, they have some of them have the umlaut,
Yeah.
which are the two dots. But yeah, so special characters are definitely allowed. But I've never seen an instance where there are numbers.
Well.
So that, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
One question that we did get from a listener was that what does a typical day look like for an information security analyst? And I think we all can kind of discuss on this for like a minute or so because we're all security analysts.
You guys can start off first.
For me and Sherwin as information security analysts, we're mostly focused on our ticketing systems and also the mailbox that we check for any potential spam that we get from staff, faculty, or students, and kind of tackle those.
Yeah, we also dabble with a lot of interesting proprietary software that helps us mitigate risk and assess a lot of the log data that we have. I know different organizations use different SIM tools, like and for those unaware, a SIM is essentially a systems incident and event management system to monitor and help quantify our log files.
So my one starts off with, like I said, I get clients, look at the project and check the scope, what I can do and not. And we set up some scanner tools, right, while we're manually kind of poking through it. So we do both, like, the automatic side of, testing, and then we do the manual side of testing at the same time. So yeah, while the scanner is doing its magic, I go through the application. I kind of try to look under the hood kind of thing and see if I can exploit it pretty much. And depending on the project length, it can be sometimes, can be like 2-3 days, can be a week, right? So depending on that timeline, then once you think that you've covered the application pretty well, pretty in depth, then you generate a report, making sure if you find a vulnerability, to report it like really clearly, like step by step, so that the client or their security team can generate themselves, that they can verify it themselves that, hey, there's a vulnerability exists. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that because I would think that based on your expertise and your role, you'd be classified more as a pen tester as opposed to having the title of a security analyst.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we are essentially pen testers, right? So, I mean, I think the pen testers is just, it's more newer and out there, and maybe, I don't know if how companies
they just want a more traditional term
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that works. Thanks, Mobu. Thanks a lot for for joining in on our podcast as a guest speaker.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
And also for our listeners out there at MNSU and beyond, we want to know your thoughts. Send us some feedback at link.mnsu.edu/cyberware feedback, and we'll post a link in the description so that you guys can send us the feedback.
Right. Or you can reach out directly to us at itsecurity@mnsu.edu.